Now, you know how like beer, coffee and blue cheese are like an acquired taste? Well, the same can be said about the Mazda MX-5. Like, to the fans, this thing just represents driving nirvana on four wheels, but to the not acquired, well, these are just underpowered and overrated hairdressers' cars not worthy of consideration. So we want to find out, is a used MX-5 worthy of consideration? And if you are considering it, like, what actually goes wrong with it? Let's find out. Now, you guys probably already know this, but the MX-5 has been around since 1989, and it's always been Mazda's affordable front-engined rear-wheel drive two-seat roadster. In this video, but we're going to be focusing on the 2015 to, well, it's actually still a current model, ND series. But even this needs a bit more explanation. Engine-wise, you're going to have a choice of either 1.5 or 2-litre 4 cylinders. And here's a fun fact, the 1.5-litre MX-5, that engine, it's the same engine that you'll find in a Mazda 2. And this, the 2-litre, you'll find this engine in the Mazda 3, the Mazda CX-3 and the Mazda CX-5. Granted, both the 1.5 and 2-litre in these are, substantially modified for the MX-5, but fundamentally, it's the same thing. These send power to the rear wheels via either a 6-speed manual or automatic transmission. But unless you're buying the auto due to medical reasons, the auto is a very disappointing decision. Look, it's not a bad automatic, but buying an automatic MX-5 is a bit like, I know, going to a Gordon Ramsay restaurant and ordering a glass of water and a piece of toast. Like, it's fine, I guess, but you're kind of robbing yourself from the true experience. Body style wise, the ND was initially available as this true drop top convertible. However, later in 2016, a retractable fastback or RF model was announced, featuring a hard top and almost like Targa aesthetics and functionality. It also added 40 kilograms to the curb weight. Actually, speaking of weight and size, bucking the trend of new models growing larger and heavier with each new generation, the ND dropped nearly 100 kilograms compared to the previous generation NC, and it was shorter too. But Mazda couldn't leave the ND alone, could they? Because there have been some updates. Firstly, in March of 2018 with improvements to the noise, vibration and harshness levels. Then in September 2018, a more substantial update saw the engine enhanced to deliver more of the good stuff, a few annoyances within the cabin were sorted out, and the levels of tech, safety and features increased. And then for the 2021 year model, there was another subtle update. More tech, a few new colours and the addition of a flagship trim spec. Actually, just on the trim specs and the special editions, globally there have been more than we can count, but here in Australia, the majority on the used market will be either the standard MX-5 or this, the higher spec GT, but a smattering of special and limited editions were also added and removed along the way. Now, if you do need all of the specific details of all those trim specs and whatnot, jump on ReDriven.com and check out our awesome and completely free ReDriven cheat sheets. And here's another fun fact, you know the Fiat and Abarth 124s? Well, they're based on the MX-5. However, according to the internet, it's basically just an MX-5 with a massive injection of unreliability and terrible customer service, but we'll get to all that when we eventually review one. Now, when it comes to looks, look, obviously we are all entitled to our own opinion, but if you don't agree with me, clearly you're wrong, because this is a stunning looking car. So I love the size of it. It is quite small, and even just like overall design wise, somehow it looks like light and fun, but kind of serious at the same time. Also, I love that from directly in front, it looks like what I would think a hysterically laughing psychopath would look like, because like the mouth kind of looks like it's laughing, but then the eyes are all kind of focused and aggressive. Now, I'm normally not a big fan of convertibles, but I have a very specific rule when it comes to convertibles. If a manufacturer has taken a normal car, like say a Porsche 911 or a BMW 3 Series or a Holden Astra, and just lopped the roof off, I don't really get it. I don't understand it. But when a car has been designed from scratch to be a convertible, just like the MX-5, good thing, good thing. However, after a few years, the exterior, it isn't perfect, but we'll cover that in a second. Now guys, we just have to pay some bills for a second. If that bothers you and you hate saving money, just skip ahead about 30 seconds. First up, a massive thank you to our finance partner, Driver. Guys, if you need help financing your next car, go to Driver, because the whole thing can be done online so simply. You can get pre-approval in literally just minutes, and there are no hidden fees. Head to the link down there to get started. And next up, the best wipers we have ever used, WIPERTECH. Easy to order, easy to install, they fit perfectly. And if you order them from the link down there, you're going to get 15% off and get express shipping for free. Now inside, it's almost like a like a greatest hits of Mazda interiors in here. And what I mean is that Mazda have this great ability of taking really cost-effective materials but still making it feel special, and this is a fantastic example of that. Actually, something else I just want to add about the overall interior design. I love that they've incorporated the exterior color here on the doors. It just kind of harks back to like old school roadsters where, you know, part of the exterior sort of became the interior. That, I know it's subtle and it's probably me being a wanker, but that I love. Now look, weight saving was a huge priority for the development team when they were making this car, but in saying that, it doesn't feel like some kind of stripped out race car or Lotus Elise in here. Look, it's not luxurious by any means, but it's a really, really nice place to be. Also remember, like, this interior has to handle the elements because, as you've noticed, there's no roof, and the fact that it still looks and feels this good, well done, Mazda. Now, later models and sort of updates, they did increase the levels of interior trim and material. So, yeah, if you do want a bit of more of a fancy schmancy, slightly luxurious MX-5, you're going to have to look at a more recent example. Now, I'm exactly the same height as Ryan Reynolds, and obviously this is in my driving position, and the ergonomics are fantastic. 2019 and onwards, you also get a telescopic steering wheel. This being a 2016 model, I can't adjust that, it's only tilt adjustable, but even with just this, the ergonomics are spot on. Like, you feel like cocooned and like just snug in here, but like where everything is, like the gear shift relation to the steering wheel, perfect. Everything's nice and easy to touch. Spot on for ergonomics. Like, actually, even with the roof up, like my head's not hitting the roof at all, good space. Now, as far as wear and tear in this particular car goes, Cam that lent us this, he lends this to like all of his friends all the time. He does heaps of track days in it. It gets a solid workout. Excellent for wear and tear. Like, the leather on the seat still feels really supple. You're losing a bit of texture here on the steering wheel, and the gear knob has definitely seen better days, but that's easily fixed. But like all the door cards, all the plastics, like there's no movement to anything. All the switchgear still feels really, really good. Yeah, like, again, I can't tell you how much of a workout this car gets, and you'd never know. It feels great. Now, look, practicality-wise, a few reviewers out there have criticised the lack of practicality in the interior. It's like a two-seat convertible sports car, yeah? It's not like a high-ace van. It doesn't need to be ultra practical. For what this car is, the practicality is pretty bloody good. Here we go. So you've got a spot for your phone just here. It does angle back a little bit, so depending on the phone and the phone case, if you accelerate hard enough, it can kind of slide out, but there's storage there. You've got a nice little cubby holders here with a spot for some coins. You've got... Some reviews say there's no door pockets. There are. They're only very, very tiny, and they just kind of feel like fingernail clippings and bits of old dry flesh. They go in there. There's no glove box. There's nowhere for your sunglasses. You've got a spot, if you're in the passenger seat, you've got a spot on your lap for like a backpack. You've got a kind of what should be a glove box thing here. That's actually not a bad size. And behind the front seat, you've also got another little cubby hole storage bin area. There are cup holders, but this being a pre-20, when was the update? Whatever the update was. There was an update and it fixed the cup holders. These can be adjusted and moved into different locations, like, no, hang on, maybe that's the wrong one. Like that. But there are a few complaints about the cup holders. They could be improved, which they were in the update. Oh, also, the roof design, as far as how it retracts and goes back up. I don't know what the word for that is. The roof design, I think, is the most intelligent of any car out there. Forget like the mechanical origami ones. Check this out, putting the roof up. It's as simple as that, and then taking the roof off. That simple. Now in the boot, it's actually surprisingly practical back here, because if I can fit in here, so can loads of your stuff. In saying that, but the actual opening aperture is quite small, and there's obviously a huge load lip, because the load lip is basically the back of the car. So putting things in, you kind of have to put it in like you're putting it into a giant bucket. You can't just slide it in. As far as the tech and features go, you know what? Even in the early base specs, pretty good. Phone connectivity and audio streaming is taken care of via Bluetooth. There's cruise control and obviously air conditioning, plus push button start, and all of this and more. But get yourself into a GT like this, or one of the limited or special edition models, and you get some extra toys. We're talking a 9-speaker Bose sound system, Mazda's MZD Connect system with a touchscreen, leather seat trim, Bilstein suspension, plus all of this and more. Just on that sound system, it's ingenious because some of the speakers are actually integrated into the headrests, and apparently the Bluetooth is still really good, even with the roof down and traveling at freeway speeds. we might see if that's true or not soon. Now, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, they were fitted from 2019 onwards, but the good news is, if you get one with this MZD system, so basically any of the GTs, Apple CarPlay and Android can be fitted aftermarket or retrofitted via Mazda. Now, in terms of safety, considering what this car is, the safety is really good. Hence, NCAP gave it a 5-star safety rating. But to take you through exactly what safety features it has, okay, this is going to be a challenge. We're going to do this again, but I'm going to leave the safety features as a message on Sam's phone. Sam's filming this now, using only the Bluetooth in the car as the microphone for the message. You'll see what I mean.
Okay, so at the bare minimum, the MX-5 will come with 4 airbags, ABS, electronic stability control, traction control, and more. But from late 2016, they also include blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert. Plus, some earlier models had an optional safety pack available, and then from 2018, tech like lane departure warning, smart city support, or basically autonomous emergency braking, and driver attention alerts were fitted. But for all the specific details, jump on ReDriven.com and check out the cheat sheet.
So, what's a used ND MX-5 like to drive? Well, first of all, if you're into sports and performance cars, you're going to have this concern that, these aren't all that fast, are they? But you know what? You're going to forget about that within the first 30 seconds of driving it. Guys, please, if you've never driven one of these, find a way to drive one, because there are very few cars that are just as blatantly fun as one of these things. Actually, just on the whole, fast thing, look, in the real world, in conditions like this is plenty fast enough. And I hate to tell you this, if you're obsessed with straight line performance speeds and quarter mile times, there's always going to be someone faster. Unless you own a Rimac Nevera, there's always going to be someone faster. And you know what? The MX-5, it doesn't give a shit about straight line speed, because that kind of involves being serious. And the MX-5 has no concern for anything serious. It just wants to be fun. Who cares if the new GR86 is faster than this, or if a Golf GTI will blow this out of the weeds in terms of performance? They can just go off flying down the road, but we'll be back here having way more fun. And that's the utterly brilliant thing about these cars, because, okay, I'm in the suburbs of Sydney, I'm doing the speed limit, and it is still so much fun. You just, hang on. You don't need to go fast to feel involved. It's awesome. And driving around with the roof down, your perception of speed is so much faster than you're actually going. That's what's important. Actually, what's really important is what this thing is like in real world scenarios, and it's great. Vision out the front is really good, especially for someone my height, and even the curves of the wheel arches let you judge where the front of the car is. But if you're a little bit height challenged, sitting low, it can be a challenge apparently. But then, thanks to the car being so small, it's as easy to maneuver in really tight situations as a Mazda 2 or a Honda Jazz or Toyota Yaris. And that's another advantage of this over larger sports cars. Now, the steering does get criticised by a few motoring journalists for not being quite as nuanced as it should be. And okay, if you're testing it back to back against an 86 or, its Subaru Twin, you might feel a difference, but in the real world, in real world scenarios like this, around this roundabout, even that just feels so good. And I was expecting this to have a few, age rattles and age creaks and weird sounds, but there's none. No rattles, no weird squeaks. All you can hear is the engine note, what's going on outside, and the laughter in here. Now, the gear change and the clutch feel, divine. You almost want to use them all the time because they're just so enjoyable. And then back down. Oh, it's great. Then there's the little ergonomic things, the distance between the brake pedal and the accelerator for little throttle blips. Perfectly placed. It just makes heel and towing just so enjoyable. Even the ride quality and I suppose the handling, I think a lot of people might assume that the ride would just feel harsh and horrible because, it is a performance car. But it's not. It's super supple and compliant. We've driven over some pretty horrible roads in this on the way to this shoot this morning, and it soaks them up really nicely. It is a performance car, and it does feel and handle like a performance car, so there's a certain level of firmness, but it's not harsh by any means. Again, it's all about having the most amount of fun as you possibly can, as often as possible. Actually, Sam, that's sitting next to me and started ReDriven with me, has this great comment about performance cars. A truly great performance car is a car that you can use almost all of its potential almost all of the time, and this nails that brief. Because see, the problem with not only supercars, but honestly some really tuned hot hatches these days, is that you can only really use 100% of its potential on very small occasions, like maybe on a track or a very deserted long straight line road. Whereas this, like, just pop down the shops to get the paper and a carton of milk and it is an absolute ball all of the time. I'm totally in love with this driving experience. However, we haven't covered what goes wrong with them yet. Okay, now this is where the MX-5 becomes even more appealing, because even though some people suggest that these just aren't fast enough, to finish first you must finish. So when it comes to like doing things like track days and performance driving, because this is so light and because the balance is fantastic, it's much lighter on its consumables like brakes and tyres than many other faster but generally heavier cars. It's a bit like a Lotus Elise like that. In fact, go to a track day and have a look at the cars that are still out on track, giving it 10 tenths in the last couple of sessions. Chances are they're going to be the smaller, lighter cars. Yeah, heavier, faster cars are faster around a track, but you generally find owners looking under bonnets, looking at cooked engines and brakes. These things will still be out on the track having fun. Even in terms of fuel consumption, like this thing, every time it's driven, it's honestly driven pretty hard, and it's returning a fuel consumption figure of a bit over 7 litres per 100 Ks. For a performance car, that's incredible. And even when it comes to like parts and labour, as I mentioned, a lot of the mechanical components are shared with more consumer-focused Mazdas, and because there's no like turbocharger or any real complexity to the engine bay, even working on it is pretty easy, so parts and labour should be affordable. And then, like, many of these still have factory warranty and support left on them. Actually, speaking of support, if you do own one of these or you're looking at buying one, make sure you join an MX-5 owners group, especially the ND ones. We joined a whole bunch of owners groups to do the research for this video. These guys, their knowledge is incredible, and their support and the help they can give, excellent. Owners groups, legends. But now it's time to betray the owners groups because, yeah, you know what's coming next. Okay, what goes wrong with the ND MX-5? Let's start with the exterior. First of all, in some of the earlier models, the roof can actually rub up against the roll hoop here and can kind of wear away at the roof itself. Later models fix this, and even on the early ones, you can adjust it back. Next up, drainage. All the drainage system and like drainage channels, make sure they get cleared out because they can clog up with, you know, bits of leaves and eventually water. That's not a good thing. Actually, just on that, make sure you check the boot down here for any signs of moisture, because if moisture builds up there, it's a good sign that the roof might be leaking because the drainage hasn't been cleared out properly. Now, the paint is quite thin thanks to trying to save weight and possibly production costs, but the problem is it can scratch and mark really easily, especially with like stone chips and stuff like that. So go over the entire car and look for any dodgy repair work, like dodgy paint jobs. Actually, just on checking for dodgy things, there's a whole bunch of really important things you need to check out when you're looking at not just one of these, but any used car. To make that easy, we've made the ultimate used car buyer's guide. Watch it up there and down there somewhere because, yeah, it could save you a fortune. Now inside, apparently these seats, when they're wrapped in leather, they can go a little bit loosey-goosey after a while, and even the driver's seat in this car, yeah, just a little bit. These screens can get a bit of a spiderweb effect. Actually, this one is getting that, and some of them can also get a little bit kind of milky looking, and also some of the infotainment systems have been known to glitch out, but that can generally be fixed with just a software update. The rear view mirrors and the roof liner above the rear window, they can come loose, but that one's a pretty sporadic report. The window switches, they can play up, but again, pretty easily fixed. And also, as I mentioned, the gear levers, they can get like this pretty worn because this thing is so much fun to use. And also, almost all of the owners complain about the bloody cup holders. But as for the rest of the interior, well, that's pretty much it for problems. But look, before we get into the mechanical aspects of what can go wrong with the ND MX-5, a massive, massive thank you to Cam, our viewer, for lending us his MX-5. Actually, just on that, if you live in Sydney or Newcastle and you have a car that you think would make for a great ReDriven video, why don't let us know in the comments down there, or jump on redriven.com and message us. Okay, mechanically, what goes wrong with the ND MX-5? I can't tell you because I'm not a qualified mechanic, but Jim is.
So there's really not that much for me to say this week. The ND MX-5 or Miata is, much like its predecessors, very reliable. There is no one big, huge problem that causes catastrophic engine failures. So overall, yeah, pretty reliable. I mean, no car is perfect. They are getting to the age now where you are going to see the odd water pump leak or a coil pack fail. But to be honest, I haven't seen either. There are some very isolated cases of the low pressure fuel pump failing. Now that's in the fuel tank, and it's located in the fuel pump module where the fuel filter is, inside the fuel tank. Now, that is scheduled to be done every 160,000 Ks, and we recently did one in the workshop at the owner's request. And I can tell you, Mazda did not design these things to be changed, because everything behind the seats pretty much had to come out just to access the top of the fuel tank. It was an absolute nightmare, to be honest with you. Transmission and driveline wise, look all pretty solid. There are some very isolated cases of second gear selector issues, but typically really not common at all. The good thing about these is that the owners typically really love them, so they very rarely miss services, so typically they're really well looked after. And the ones that have been tracked, again, typically because the owners love them, they've usually been fairly well looked after too.
Okay, so should you buy one? Oh my God, yes, yes you should. In fact, if you want like the ultimate fun car, this is probably it. Buying a dedicated sports car rarely involves including logic into the decision-making process, but the ND MX-5 is simply the logical choice. It easily provides just as much enjoyment and dynamic depth as far more exotic performance cars when it comes to driving in its own unique way. It's small and lightweight, so like a Lotus Elise, it's kind to the mechanicals and the consumables even when being pushed hard. Yet the MX-5 is substantially more affordable to buy, and it offers a level of practicality and accommodation the Elise could only dream of. It's safe and relatively fuel efficient. It's a Mazda, so unlike much of the competition, parts and labour are affordable, and chances are very little will go wrong in the first place. And most important of all, it is just so much fun all of the time at any speed. Honestly, if you're having a bad day, this thing will cheer you up. Not only should you buy an MX-5, everybody should own an MX-5, because that would just make the world a better place. Now guys, we need to know, what do you think of the MX-5? And if you enjoyed this video, why not hit that like and maybe the subscribe button as well? And if you'd like to support us, or if you're in the position to support us, why not join our Patreon? The link is down there. You're going to get even more ReDriven content. See you next time. But Mazda couldn't leave the ND alone, could they? Could they? I don't want to say lesser Mazdas, but more commonly available Mazdas. And even that's the windscreen wiper, Sam. They work, that's good sign.
But in all honesty, I've actually never seen one do that, and I will do that again.
Actually, just on that, make sure you... Oh. Go on, here we go. But the problem with that is, it can scratch really easily, and especially with stone chips, it can mark really easily. Funky bunch. Here we go.